In the year 1966, the American cultural anthropologist Marshall Shallins presented a paper at Man the Hunter Symposium in which he argued that our hunter-gatherers' ancestors worked an average of 4 hours per day. In 1987, a study of the Guabu people who live in parts of Venezuela, Colombia, and Brazil concluded that existing hunter-gatherer adults spent just 3 hours a day hunting and gathering food and occupying themselves with other work, such as building shelters. Now, if our hunter-gatherer ancestors worked only 4 hours per day, could there be something they know about work and productivity that we do not? Yes, but before I continue, I'd like to make it clear that the idea I'm about to share in this video might not be useful for everyone. If this video doesn't make sense to you, just do a few press-ups and you'll regain all the time and energy you wasted watching it.
Yeah.
You gotta put that on Instagram.
The very first thing you have to understand about the 8 hours workday is that it was not created based on the number of hours humans can be productive. Don't ever forget this. In fact, the number of hours people have to work all through history have always been determined by people who didn't have work, such as the kings, the slave owners, and the industrialists. According to some Egyptian ancient records from Deir el-Medina, the village where non-slave artisans lived, workers in ancient Egypt officially worked 8 hours a day. But there are two things you have to remember here. First, the ancient Egyptian calendar had 8 days in a week, so people had to work 6 or 7 days before they have some rest. And yes, the king and slave owners determined how long people worked. For example, slaves in Imperial Rome were at the grindstone 24/7, even though most free artisans only worked 6 hours a day, from 6 a.m. to midday. In his 1884 book, 6 Centuries of Work and Wages, Oxford professor James Thorold Rogers suggested that the typical working day for peasants in England in the Middle Ages averaged no more than 8 hours. So while free humans seem to work about 6 to 8 hours a day for many centuries, the advent of the Industrial Revolution made things worse.
Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal.
With the Industrial Revolution changing the world, the unskilled worker in mid-18th century England worked as much as 11 hours a day, or in other perspective, 208 days a year. And the factory worker in the mid-19th century in England worked as long as 16 hours a day, or 311 days a year.
We were paid $2 a week, and the working hours of all the girls extended from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 in the evening.
When it became clear that working 14 to 16 hours a day was both brutal and unsustainable, leaders like Welsh activist Robert Owen advocated for shorter workdays. Owen raised the demand for an 8-hour day in 1810, and by 1817 he had formulated the goal of an 8-hour working day with the slogan, 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. And that's according to the CBNC article. In his 1818 book, Two Memorials on Behalf of the Working Classes, Robert Owen wrote, and I quote, "The working classes may be injuriously degraded and oppressed in 3 ways. First, when they are neglected in infancy. Second, when they are overworked by their employer and are thus rendered incompetent from ignorance to make good use of high wages when they can procure them. And third, when they are paid low wages for their labor."
Workers and reformers protested. They formed unions and associations and fought for government regulations to limit the workday.
In the year 1914, Ford Motor Company cut daily hours down to 8, and other industrialists of his age followed suit. But there's still a problem. You see, the kind of work people do in the 19th and 20th century is different from the kind of work most of us do today. Most references in this video have been about physical labor, since that was what the world knew for most of our existence. The problem, however, is that most humans in the 21st century are mental laborers. While human capacity for productivity is limited to a few hours each day, people engaged in physical labor could be forced to work extremely long hours. But it's practically impossible to do mental work for long hours. For example, let's say there are two people, John and Ruth. John works in an Amazon warehouse. While Ruth works as a fiction writer. Even though after a few hours, both John and Ruth will be tired, Ruth will no longer be able to write anything meaningful. You could still make John work 8 or more hours and still get something out of him. The reason for this is because when you're doing a repetitive task like most physical labor jobs, not as much brain power is used. At the same time, you moving around keeps the energy level up. So you can work a factory worker to the bone physically and then tell him to keep going. He can drink a cup of coffee and keep going at decreased productivity. But you can't really do this with a computer programmer, a physicist, a writer, or other mental work, which most of us do today. So this brings us to a major point of this video. Most people are not productive after all. In a study of 1,989 UK office workers, the researcher found that the average office worker is only productive for 2 hours and 23 minutes each day. Yes, you heard that correctly. The average office worker is only productive for 2 hours and 23 minutes each day. Now, let's pretend there are 2 reasons for that. First, your employer wants you to be at the office for 8 hours every day, so you're there. In his 1933 book, Down and Out in Paris and London, George Orwell wrote, "A plongeur is a slave and a wasted slave, doing stupid and largely unnecessary work. He is kept at work ultimately because of a vague feeling that he would be dangerous if he had leisure." Since most employers want us to be at the office 9 to 5, we simply figure out how to do in 8 hours what we could do in 2. In his 1942 book, Parkinson's Law, Northcote Parkinson wrote, "Work expands to fill the time available for its completion." According to this Inc.com article, an average office worker wastes time reading news websites, making calls to partners or friends, texting or instant messaging, discussing non-work-related things with co-workers, and yes, checked social media like 1,000,000 times.
You just transferred a call back to Vera in the art department that was supposed to go to me.
The second reason why most people are not productive is that the office environment is not usually conducive for productivity. First, you have pointless meetings.
You can have meetings after meetings after meetings, where people can actually end up being burnt out. Whereas if you're having fun with,
then co-workers' attitudes, and then distractions.
Oh yeah, cool sports story. Back to the studio.
Now to sport with Meredith Sheehan.
According to a study conducted by researchers at the University of California, Irvine, employees are interrupted approximately every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. People working at the office are often distracted by co-workers, phones that are ringing, loud conversations, and people moving around in the workplace. Now, listen to this. If most people are productive for only about 2.5 hours each day, all you need to be 50% more productive is to figure out how to get 4 hours of real productivity out of your day. In his 2003 book, Ready for Anything, David Allen wrote, "What we truly need to do is often what we most feel like avoiding." In his 2001 book, Eat That Frog, Brian Tracy wrote, "If you have to eat 2 frogs, Eat the ugliest one first. The first thing you want to do if you need to be more productive is to start each day with your most important work. Believe me, you have only a few hours each day to be productive, and if you don't tackle the most important thing first, you'll end up being busy with unimportant things. The second thing you want to do is to work while you're working. In his 2016 book, Deep Work, Carl Newport wrote, and I quote, "To produce at your peak level, you need to work for extended periods with full concentration on a single task, free from distraction." So, for example, I usually work between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. What I do each day is to block out those 5 hours as if they don't exist. During these 5 hours, my phone is silent. No YouTube, news sites, social media, or contact with the outside world. Yes, I sometimes get distracted by my little kids, even while writing the script for this video, but of course, that's not every 3 minutes. Block out 4 hours each day and tell yourself nothing but work during that period. The third thing that can make you productive is to concentrate on a single task at a time. Multitasking doesn't help you get more done. In fact, several studies have found that multitasking kills your productivity, makes you tired, and even damages your brain.
Remember, just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done.
Even though most of us appear to be busy, movement isn't the same as progress or productivity. Working only 4 hours a day can make you more productive if only you'll block out those 4 hours. Concentrate on one thing at a time and focus on the most important tasks first. Another thing that has greatly improved my productivity in the last 13 months is my new understanding about sleep. I honestly think you can't be productive if you think about sleep the way most people do. So I made the video on your screen now to show you how your sleeping philosophy affects your productivity and how you can be more productive by sleeping better. Click it right here. That's it.